Men, it's time to rise up. You're called to lead with courage, labor with purpose, and love sacrificially like Jesus. The world needs men of action, warriors who advance, not retreat. Now is the time to stand firm in faith, be the man God has designed you to be, and make an impact for the kingdom. Are you ready to step up to the plate? Will you answer the call? This is Mantalk, the podcast promoting biblical masculinity.
Hey, welcome to Mantalk. I'm glad to have my good friend here, Terry St. John. We both had a cancer journey, so we're here today to talk about cancer. Now, Terry's had 2 episodes, 2 incidents with this unwelcome visitor. You know, so many people in our culture, society, family, and churches are having bouts with cancer, and really, we just want to talk from our heart. I apologize for my allergy, pollen voice, but other than that, we're going to go right after it. So here's Terry St. John, a dear friend, a pastor, a good guy. Terry, tell us a little bit about your experience with cancer.
Well, the first bout that I had was back probably 28, 29 years ago. And I found out that I had melanoma cancer, level 2. And that really shook me because I really wasn't prepared to get that report. And, I think I learned so much through that time, and I was so gripped with fear and just consumed with, I'm telling my wife I think I look better in a black suit instead of a blue suit, picking out my tie and my shirt, you know what I'm saying? And I've learned a lot since then. So that first bout was a real eye-opener for me. Yeah.
So I appreciate what you just said, that there was some real fear going on.
Oh, yeah.
Not everybody's singing the hallelujah chorus when they get diagnosed with cancer. Not everybody's smiling on their way to the funeral home to make final arrangements.
No.
Some people are like that. Yeah. Hey, more power to them. Yeah. But what was the greatest challenge in all of this when as you process this? And it does take time to process. So how did you process this? How did you come to some conclusions concerning the real diagnosis of cancer?
Well, I mean, for me, it was getting off by myself. I told my wife, I said, I've got to go somewhere and get alone with God. And really taking that time just to put my focus back on the Lord. I was so consumed with every aspect of what I was feeling. One of my greatest concerns, because I already had myself in the grave, I'm thinking, how is this going to affect my family? What's this going to do to the church? And I'm thinking through all of those things. And my wisdom to people now, and I've had several people in our church that have had, very, very serious bouts with cancer, that I tell them, hey, don't get any further than you need to be. Don't go any further than that. Instead of putting yourself in the grave, give God an opportunity to walk you through the process and teach you through it. I remember standing in the middle of a road beside a man one day, and his house was burning to the ground. I was a young Christian, young pastor, and he looked at me and he said, I'm not asking why, I'm asking what. I was floored when he said that, because in my mind, I'm thinking, Lord, why is this happening? Why is he going through this? But from his mind, as a very mature Christian, he was saying, okay, God, that's your house. I'm just looking at what you want me to do through this and what you're trying to teach me in the midst of this.
So did you ask that question of the Lord? Did you have the why question? Lord, how come? Why me? Why now? Why did I get cancer? Did you face this?
I had that question in the first bout. The second bout, I didn't have that question. I was more of the frame of mind, okay, Lord, what is it you want from this standpoint on? I mean, what am I to learn from this? And a statement that my sister sent me the first bout that I had with cancer was, not everything that happens to you is always about you. And that helped me in the second bout with prostate cancer to realize that God was up to something. I truly believe he's the blessed control of all things. I think he's the superintendent of our soul. And if that's what God desires for my life, that his purposes and plan can be fulfilled in my life, then so be it. Who am I to question that? And also, I look back on it, and I've heard all my Christian life, been saved for 50 years. You're not supposed to question God. Well, I don't agree with that statement. God's not intimidated by you and I questioning what he's up to. I think he wants to give us an understanding, but if he doesn't, then that's fine. I'm learning that I don't have to understand. I'm just to trust him, no matter what I face.
Well, 2012, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I was so ignorant, I didn't even know what a prostate was.
Yeah.
And the doctor said some shocking things when he offered out options, which I won't go into here on this podcast. But he said one thing in particular that rocked my world as a potential treatment, which was a ridiculous thing for a physician to say. But I remember being buffaloed and just overwhelmed, the unknown, what if, and so on and so forth. And of course, I didn't know anything, so I went on a journey to try to figure this thing out.
Right.
But let's talk about this. What did you do, especially on the second time, to encourage yourself? I remember the first time, and we communicated through your experience and through my experience together. Mm-hmm. But on the second time around with the prostate cancer, you seemed to be pretty much at peace, hey, this God's got it and all this kind of stuff. So the whole atmosphere had changed. So how did you encourage yourself, especially the second go round?
Well, I think it's found in and my advice to people. That's why it's important for you to maintain discipline in your life in developing and cultivating that relationship with the Lord. I get calls all the time where people have some tragedy or something that goes on, and they're not in that position to be able to handle it. They haven't developed their relationship. They haven't put attention on cultivating a real trust in God and his attributes and his character qualities, and they bottom out. I'm thankful that I've been a very disciplined person in staying on top of my relationship, and surely not saying that I'm perfect or anything of that nature, but that helped me tremendously, that I was just to stay in the flow of what God had already taught me and what he was teaching me. And I think that's a real key. I hear so many men, used to be years ago when a man was diagnosed with prostate cancer, they'd pretty much tell you, get your affairs in order because your days are numbered. But now there are many, many options, and it's not as life-threatening as it used to be. But I think that's all the more reason, especially for us men, to stay on top of our walk and our relationship with the Lord. So when these situations do come, you're not just frazzled emotionally, out of control, not knowing what to do. We'll call the pastor. He'll be able to help me with it. I think we all ought to have that relationship with the Lord when those times come, that we can stay steady on course and stay in the flow of what God's doing, trusting him. Doesn't mean that you don't, not consumed with fear and the questions, but you recognize that he is the blessed control of all things, and he is the superintendent of my soul, and he's going to take care of the situation. And he's got it. So
what role did your church play, and what role should a church play in a situation where a member or the pastor gets cancer? What advice would you have to local churches, members of a local church, not only toward the leader or the pastor, but toward other people in the congregation? I know you and I both have people call us all the time that have prostate cancer, and I'm happy to tell them in 15 minutes what it took me 6 months to figure out. And you can help people. I can help people because our ministry comes out of our misery.
That's right.
So what did your church do that was a help to you and your family?
Well, I've got to brag on our people because they were so supportive. I chose to go to VCU, which was 3 hours away, and which meant I'd have to leave on Sunday evening and be back on Friday evening to take my radiation treatment during the week. And they gave me, that time off for 5 straight weeks, no questions asked. I mean, were so supportive, just took care of my every need and ministered to us and supported us. And I sat down with them to start with, and I said, guys, I don't know what I'm facing, and I won't be able to give you as much time but I will do everything in my power to be responsible. And they never ask a thing of me. And I would encourage any churches or leaders that are listening, support your pastor. He lives in a real world.
Yeah.
We have had so many people in our church that have gone through bouts with cancer, and it's a great opportunity to bear one another's burden and be there to support them and love on them and minister to them and do whatever needs to be done to be a blessing to them. So I think it's a great opportunity for churches to minister and to minister to individuals also.
So we need to be careful of what we say to people who are in grief or suffering or
Right.
facing a cancer battle. I remember one time I got diagnosed with a certain malady, and I told a friend of mine about it. And his comment was this: "Well, yeah, my cousin came down with that, and
Yeah.
he didn't last 2 years." I mean, what kind of idiotic thing is that to say to somebody?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we need to be cautious and
That's
be
right.
encouraged. We need to be realistic.
Yeah.
And I just throw this out: you really don't need to send the surefire health food cure that's
Yeah.
guaranteed for success,
Yeah.
or some nonsensical, over the top declaration of faith that you're guaranteeing you're always going to get healed. I mean, I'm all for praying the prayer of faith, but
Yeah.
some of this stuff is extreme,
Right.
and we're not for that, but we
That's
are
right.
for the prayer of faith. So, what about your family, Terry? How did your family respond, and what did they do that was a real help and benefit to you?
Well, for each one of them, they were walking through the situation with me, but they were looking at it from their perspective. And each one of them were different in how they handled it. And my responsibility, there again, it was a great opportunity to lead my family, my wife and my children. And I think the more at peace I was with the situation helped them. That I was constantly praying with them, praying for them, but there were some things I couldn't do for them. Some of the needs that they had to be met with their relationship with the Lord. That there were some things that God wanted to teach them in the midst of it. Mm-hmm. And, we all profited from it. It's a very negative situation, but we learned so much from it. And I would say right now, as I've said many times, walking through that situation with cancer made me a better man in many different ways. And it helped us tremendously as a family. I saw us coming together and really a deep appreciation and love greater than ever before. So that was a real blessing.
So what advice would you have for a spouse of a person who's facing a cancer diagnosis? What would you say to that spouse that things they could do perhaps to be a help?
Yeah, from a spouse's standpoint, speaking to any lady that her husband's been diagnosed with prostate cancer or any form of cancer, is to maintain your level of support for him. I recognize it's not easy. From a woman's standpoint, they're going to be more emotionally involved than the man is. But you're there to be a support and to encourage him and strengthen him. And there again, you're going to have to, really work in your relationship with the Lord and letting him be your support system. It's a great opportunity on all levels of each person to be drawn to the Lord. Jehoshaphat, when he was surrounded by the enemy, one of the things that he said, "We have no strength against this company that cometh against us, and neither know we what to do, but our eyes upon the Lord." And, there's so many men that I've seen them go through situations like this, they bottom out. Ladies, don't be critical of your husband. Be there to be a support. Be a blessing to him. Give him what he needs in that time just to encourage him and strengthen him and minister to him. It's one of those situations that it's not really about you in that moment, but it gives you an opportunity and a platform to be what God's called you to be.
When I got diagnosed, a good friend of mine, he got diagnosed as well. His was far worse than mine. In fact, he's on hospice today.
Yeah.
It looks like any moment he's going to graduate and be promoted.
Yeah.
But we walked through it together, and I went everywhere.
Yeah.
I went to local. I went to National Institutes of Health for a particular MRI available nowhere else at that time.
Yeah.
I went to Cancer Treatment Centers of America, wound up at Hopkins for the prostatectomy. So I went and asked everybody, and I found out a radiologist thinks you ought to go with his discipline.
Yeah.
Surgeons think you ought to go with surgery. Everybody is biased, and they try to sell you. And I talked to all of them.
Yeah.
And made a conclusion that we're going to go with robotic surgery, which theoretically is supposed to be preserving situations better than others. It doesn't always pan out this way, but it was a time of perplexity, you know, because good night, all of this information, all of these experts giving you different opinions, and everybody has their own biases, and they're trying to sell you. I had people call me from out of state trying to get me to come and seek treatment at their facilities. So what about during this, were there any particular perplexing situations that arose? Anything that was really seemingly insurmountable, maybe depression, like on the first time, address that a little bit. I just talked to a lady at church this week, and she has cancer. She lives alone, has no family, and she's facing depression. Yeah. Depression is an unwelcome guest that often comes when we get a bad diagnosis. Can you address the perplexities and things like depression just a little bit?
Well, 1 Samuel chapter 30, when David was hitting back, and they saw the fire where Ziklag had been destroyed. He'd lost everything. He didn't know that at the time, but then when he gets there, his family's gone, his personal belongings, everything was destroyed. And the scripture talks about how David encouraged himself in the Lord. And one of the first things he did was sit down and ask God questions. What do I do? And to me, that's a real key. Not turning from the Lord, but turning to the Lord. And there again, I didn't do such a good job of it the first time, but I learned a lot through it. That was really in preparation for the next time when I faced the battle with prostate cancer. And I think that's the real key. And there again, He's not intimidated with us sitting down and asking him questions in relationship to it. I had a lady in our church that she had been diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, and it was really attacking her physically. And you were preaching at our church that night, and you made the statement that when you walk through situations like that, don't be intimidated to give God your report and be honest with him. She went forward that night and knelt at the altar, and I talked with her later. And she told me, she said, you know what? I did exactly what Harold said. I went to the altar and told God what my true feelings were about me having muscular dystrophy. And she said, you know what? I feel so much better. And I feel like that God has really liberated me, and he's encouraged me through that he is concerned about my situation. Well, the devil was lying to her. He was saying, if you're a Christian, then why is God allowing this in your life? What is it that you've done wrong? That's
punishment.
Right.
Yeah, when I was facing this, there came a time when I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to pray for me. I surely didn't know how to pray for anybody else.
Yeah.
And I talked to my friend Ralph Satura, and I said, Ralph, how are you supposed to pray for sick people?
Yeah.
And I said, Ralph, some people can believe for miracles and resurrections from the dead and broke bones getting healed and all this. Some people can believe for anything, but the crowd I run with have a hard time believing anything. Yeah. And I said, how are we supposed to pray for sick people? And what he said really helped me. He said, Harold, when you pray for sick people, you always pray in faith believing. You always pray in faith believing, and that way, if God chooses not to heal, at least it wasn't your unbelief that missed the miracle.
That's right. That's right.
So that's been my practice in praying for other people, to pray in faith, to pray believing. And what an encouragement it is to find somebody who's believing God for you and with you.
That's right.
I was able to go to a cancer support group in Richmond, Virginia, prostate cancer. These guys are candid. They are absolutely vulnerable. They'll tell you what it's like. It's like a revival meeting, man. No holes barred. And they've been through every experience, and that was very helpful to gain some wisdom from people who's walked farther down this road than I have. So let's talk about this for a minute. What's the greatest piece of advice you were given in your cancer journey? What was the greatest piece of advice?
Yeah, I would, referring back to the statement that I made earlier, that not everything that happens to you is always about you. That was so liberating for me. And, I have to, and I can honestly say, as I walked through that second bout, it was just an opportunity to minister to people. I had so many different people there in the hospital and the hotel that I could go to daily and pray with them and minister to them. And, at the end of the day, Harold, I didn't have any problems. I mean, some of the situations that I saw was horrendous. And, it tenderized my heart and helped me to have more of a ministering spirit to people and understanding exactly what they were going through, because I was going through it myself.
I remember being at the Cancer Treatment Center of America down in Georgia, Newton, Georgia. There was a gentleman there who had a cancer treatment center badge on, so I knew why he was there. Okay. And but I pretended like I didn't know why he was there. And I said to him, hey, man, what's going on?
Yeah.
He had prostate cancer too, and his was worse than mine as well.
Yeah.
So I said to him and his wife, I said, we're at the entrance at the overhang trying to get in the front door. I said, hey, it'd be all right if we had a little prayer time.
Yeah.
Boy, it sure would. I never got turned down when I offered to pray for people who were sick.
Right.
I was one time getting a bone scan, which I didn't know how serious that was.
Yeah.
Nobody was watching Jerry Springer on the television set.
No.
They were all sitting there like,
yeah,
and hard on. And I went beside this one guy, this gentleman, and I said, what's going on? And he told me his story, and he was in bad shape. And I said, hey, would it be okay if we had a little word of prayer?
Yeah.
He said it sure would.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, praying with people, for people, and praying prayers of faith instead of prayers of doubt is a tremendous help and encouragement to people.
It is.
So let's talk about this for a second. We talked about some things that have been helpful. What's the worst piece of advice somebody gave you? My doctor gave me the worst counsel, which if this wasn't a mixed audience, I'd go ahead and throw it out here. But what would you say was the worst thing that somebody said to you when you found out you had cancer?
Yeah. The worst thing that was said to me was, don't worry about it, just leave it alone. Which I think is the worst thing in the world. And I know from a man's standpoint, we don't want to have to go through the treatment, going through all the testing and all of that. But I would say to any man that's listening, don't put it off. Their statistics are telling that prostate cancer is affecting men at a younger age now. And, I'm an advocate of making sure that you stay on top of it. And you get on it at an early age. Because if I would have listened to that man, mine was very aggressive. My PSA level was 15 at the time. And, thank God it was contained. But if I hadn't stayed on top of it, it could have gotten outside the prostate.
Sure. My dad died with prostate cancer at age 91. He died with it.
Yeah.
There's three kinds of prostate cancer. There's the slow growing, which you'll probably die from something else before you'll die from that. There's intermediate growth, and then there's the aggressive.
Yeah.
I had two lesions. I had the slow type and the intermediate type. And I made the decision to have surgery after the biopsy. And of course, with the biopsy, that's the favorite part, isn't it? Where they're shooting needles up your backside, collecting data.
Yeah.
And I had 22.
Yeah.
And the lady said to me, hey, would you like to watch this on the television screen? And I said, Are you crazy? Are you crazy? I mean, I was terrified and sweating bullets and all these needles going in there, and a good night. And before it was over, they were holding my hand. I was in such bad shape. I wish.
You're supposed to be an encouragement, Harold.
I wish they had knocked me out. Yeah, I shouldn't have said all of that, but that's part of it. That's just part of it. You'll get through it. I mean, don't worry about that.
Well, a good shot of fentanyl will take care of that.
They didn't give me a shot of anything. I wish they had, but so yes, there's people. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody. But you know, when it comes down to it, the individual has to make the best best decision for themselves at that particular juncture of time.
That's right.
You know, if a man's 85 and he's got slow growing cancer, just watch and wait.
Oh yeah,
watch and wait. You don't need to do anything radical. But if it's you had the aggressive type. And if you had not done something, you probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah, more than likely, that's true.
Probably not.
My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and prostate cancer, and the doctors always told him, you know, it's something else is going to get you, and something else did get him. It was but mine was super aggressive, and I'm glad we did. I went the radiation route, and then they did hormone therapy, which has been extremely interesting.
So, did your voice change when you did the hormone treatment? I mean, it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then.
No, because my doctor looked at me and said, "I'm getting ready to thrust you into menopause," and I'm like, he said, "You're going to have hot flashes and mood swings and cry all the time," and I'm like,
Yeah, you get to messing with hormones. It affects a lot of things, but it can be a lifesaver, and it can be temporary.
Yeah.
And some people, they have to do that their whole earthly existence, which, whew.
Yeah.
But anyhow, well, let's talk about this for a second.
And let me add,
the
hormone therapy wasn't really that bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was not as bad as what I expected it to be.
Okay.
Now, I have a lady in the church. She said, "I'm struggling with menopause." I said, "I know exactly how you feel, sister." Paul said, "To be all things to all people." That's a little ridiculous.
I'll tell you what. All right, let's talk about this for just a second here. We got a few seconds left. Let's talk about suffering, okay? Grappling with suffering. I believe everybody's trying to come to some resolution on the purpose of suffering in a God-ordained universe.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this concept of suffering in relation to cancer, perhaps, or any theological helps that could give us some encouragement to go through these difficult times?
Well, I think there are three things. Number one, you got to recognize the human limitations. We are limited. Number two, you got to recognize the demonic imitations. Mm-hmm. It's a great opportunity for the enemy to try to discredit God in the midst of it. But thirdly, you got to recognize the divine interventions that can take place. Mm-hmm. And that God, in the midst of suffering, as somebody said, thanksgiving is the first step of faith. You know, as the scripture says, in all things give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. Learning to have that thankful spirit. The Bible doesn't say I have to thank him for the situation, but it says I need to thank him in the midst of it. And to me, that's the beginning right there.
What challenge would you have for the person who's listening, who will or is facing at this very moment a cancer diagnosis? What do you have any kind of a quick challenge that might be a help?
Well, first and foremost is draw near to the Lord. Secondly is to be vocal, communicate, let people know. You need people in your life. I had a man tell me one time, he said, "I don't need people." Well, 6 months later, you know, he did need people. And God, he puts in the word for you and I to bear one another's burden. It's an opportunity for you to be ministered to, because you're going to go through a time emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. Every aspect of your world is going to be rocked. And God uses people to minister to you. So I think drawing close to the Lord, but being very open and vocal about where you're at, and embracing people that desire to be a blessing to you.
That's great, Terry. Well, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, my brother.
And hey, we just want to be an encouragement to people that's going through this. We've been there, done that, and learned a few things, hopefully. And we hope that some of this will be a help and resonate with people who are listening.
Amen.
Thank you, Terry. God bless you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Harold. God bless you, my brother.
Well, until next time.